안녕하세요 여러분, 미국 갱너맨입니다. 오늘은 여러분들을 위해 좀 특별한 손님 모였습니다. 손님 소개시켜주기 전에 제 목표가 그냥 여러분들께 미국 베스 낚시 방법 아니면 루어 아니면 이런 것도 알려주는 거나 미국 낚시 스타일 알려주는 겁니다. 그래서 오늘은 미국 베스 낚시 설명하려면은 아마 미국에서 제일 탑한 선수 모이면 좋겠죠. 그래서 오늘은 진정한 미국 프로 선수 모였습니다. 우리 미국에서 그 프로 선수라는 말이 엄청 조심스럽게 씁니다. 사전에 찾아보면은 프로라는 말은 먹고 살기 위해서 어떤 거를 하는 겁니다. 미국에서 한 200 아니면 300명 정도 프로 선수인데 프로 선수 중에 고급 급에 있습니다. 그리고 제가 만났던 낚시 선수 아니면 사람 중에 제일 착하고 제일 그 humble 겸손한 분이고 그냥 만나면은 어쩔 수 없이 완전 큰 팬 돼버리는 거예요. 일단 얼마나 대단한 선수인지 먼저 설명해드리겠습니다. 캘리포니아 출신입니다. 저처럼 캘리포니아 출신이고 보통 캘리포니아 선수들이 선수 되고 싶은 사람들이 무조건 동부로 가야 됩니다. 거리가 어마어마해서 하기가 쉽지 않고 베스 차이 서부에 있는 필드랑 그 동부 필드 엄청 다르고 예를 들어서 제일 가까운 필드 대회 필드가 운전해서 한 20시간, 24시간 정도. 근데 동부 선수들이 가끔 1시간, 2시간 정도만 운전하고 아마 저기서 낚시를 많이 해서 필드 느낌도 잘 알고 근데 서부 선수들이 그런 거 보통 없습니다. 그 상관에서도 이제 Bassmaster Elite가 있습니다. 근데 그거 하기 전에 미국 서부에서 투어가 있는데 저 투어 챔피언십 2번, 3년 만에 2번 우승했고 그거 한 다음에 동부 그 투어 NPFL National Pro Fishing League에 뛰었고 첫 해 앵글 리어 포인트 3위. 작년 Bassmaster Elite 진주를 하기 전에 Bassmaster Opens라는 시리즈에 뛰어야 되는데 AOY 2위 했습니다. 지금 Bassmaster Elite의 앵글 리어 포인트 20위입니다. 브랜든 팔로닉이랑 포인트가 똑같고 그리고 신기하게 둘이 같은 그래프입니다. 그래서 제가 어떻게 브라이언트 만나게 되냐면은 저는 11년 전에 고등학교 때 하이스쿨 피싱 대회에 잠깐 하고 있었는데 보트 빌려주고 운전해주는 사람 필요했었는데 그 친구가 브라이언트랑 많이 가까워서 브라이언트가 해줬어요. 그때 우리 캘리포니아 델타라는 필드에 있었는데 델타 필드 어떤 필드라면은 진짜 어려운 필드입니다. 저기서 바다랑 연결돼서 그 처소가 있거든요. 그래서 타이밍가 진짜 쭝하는데 브라이언트가 여기 가서 이거 던져서 바로 입질 왔어요. 그거 하기가 진짜 쉽지 않습니다. 그 순간부터 이 친구가 누구지? 그래서 지금까지 Bassmaster Elite까지 가서 저는 하나도 놀랍지 않습니다. 이 영상 통해 그 미국 탑 베스 낚시인들이 어떤 마인드로 낚시를 하는지 많이 볼 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Thank you, Bryant, for making the time to do this. I know that you've been really busy rigging up your boat and getting ready for the Elite Series season, since I can imagine there's got to be a lot of stuff to get ready for, huh?
It is. There is. It's a lot more than I ever expected. I never really did a lot in the off season, compared to this year. I would just kind of fish and do a little bit of business stuff here and there. But this year, I've kind of went all out on all that stuff and getting the new boat and all that stuff. So it's been busy, but it's definitely been fun. I mean, it's pretty, it's exciting to be able to do all this stuff and have this opportunity. And I wanted to do it right, so we went all in.
So how far along the process would you say you are right now?
We're almost done. I'm gonna leave in. Hopefully, I will be leaving in exactly 1 week. So we're finishing up the boat wrap. The boat is rigged. The truck's gonna get wrapped after that, which should take a couple days, and then hopefully I'll have a day to run the boat around, make sure everything works, and then pack it up and head to Florida.
Kind of going off of that, could you kind of give us a basic rundown of who you are and how you got into fishing and how you can work all the way up to the Elite Series as well, since most of the people I imagine don't don't really know who you are, at least in Korea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You are, but
No, totally. I'm trying to keep it brief, but my dad, he was always into the outdoors, and my grandfather was also into the outdoors, and I grew up in California my whole life, more specifically in the San Francisco Bay Area, and not a lot of outdoor stuff to do there, but there was enough, and we would go catch trout and catch whatever bit really. And then one day I saw a guy uh, catch a bass off a dock next to me, and I was really interested in it. I'd read a few, my grandfather actually had a Bass Pro Shops catalog in his tool shed, and I found it one day, and that kind of sparked the interest. And then I saw that guy catch one. And man, that was really cool, because up till then I was just soaking power bait for the stock trout in all the lakes, and I saw him catch it on a lure, and that really kind of intrigued me. It's something you don't see every day, especially in the Bay Area. Those are trout heavy lakes, stuff like that. So that got the wheels spinning a little bit, and did a lot of research. Um, I couldn't tell you the timeline of it, but I don't know, 3, 6 months later, I ended up catching my first bass on a pontoon rental, in, again, one of those Bay Area lakes. And then just kind of kept it going, we didn't have all the cool YouTube stuff and all the internet back in the day. So my resources as far as learning were really limited, but we catch the TV shows on a Saturday morning, all the fishing TV shows and all that stuff. Fast forward a little while, jumped into my first tournament when I was 16 years old with my dad. We didn't do great, but we caught our limit and had fun, and that's kind of when it got real serious, because once I love bass fishing in general. I still do. I don't think I'll ever not love it. But once I put that competition aspect into it, that was definitely different. That one made me really, really it really opened my eyes to how much fun a tournament could really be, because it's just everything in a tournament is just more intense. If you catch a big one in a tournament, it's more intense than catching one just fun fishing. So that kind of led me to really fishing a lot of tournaments, a lot of the team stuff in Northern California. And I did kind of just the stair step process of working my way up through the ranks, and did some co-angler stuff, jumped to the front of the boat in the pro-ams that we have out here. And then a couple years ago, I actually had an opportunity to go fish nationally in a circuit called the National Professional Fishing League, which goes all around the United States, mostly the Eastern United States. But I did that, had a lot of fun doing that for a few years. And then last year I fished the Bassmaster Opens, just the Southern region, which is, I got kind of lucky that was the last time that you could qualify for the Elite Series through just one region. And timing's everything in bass fishing, and that was just I got lucky. It was my timing. It was my time to make it to the elites, and I was fortunate enough to qualify. And here we are. We're a week out from heading back east and going and fulfilling the real kind of the childhood dream of getting to fish on that highest level.
I remember when I first met you 11 years ago. I've obviously met you through Chris Fink, but I don't think anyone. I mean, I didn't know who you were, and I don't think anyone really did. But until especially the past, I guess like 6 or 7 years, when you started finally, fishing a lot of the bigger events from the front of the boat. And I remember you won FLW. You got those 2 Wild West championships as well. So, and then you go back east and seeing the stuff you've done as well too is I can't say I've been surprised, because I remember that day at the Delta, you even those I think you only fished like 5 or 6 hours or something, and I mean you didn't even really fish, but just based on kind of the way you explained things to me, it was just like a different level. I was just able to feel it. So But along your journey, now that you've gone all the way to the Elite Series, has there been any points where you kind of had the confidence, or you felt like, oh, I can make that next level jump, or I can compete with these guys? Or has it just been one of those things where, just kind of taking the next step, not sure how things are going to go, and just kind of been working out in your favor? How has that been?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never overly confident when I go to that next step. But if you do the I call it the stair step correctly, and you don't get ahead of yourself, it should work out as long as you think you're ready. But I did it kind of the slower way. I really stair stepped it. A lot of the kids now, especially like you look at some of the Elite Series guys, a lot of them are, under 30 years old, a lot of them under 25 years old. It's pretty crazy how fast you can really go to get to the top level. But mine was definitely a little bit slower because I always made sure that I was ready. I didn't want to do anything too quickly. I actually going from co-angler to the front of the boat, I actually feel like I did that too quickly, and that was the one instance where I really kind of regretted not taking an extra year in learning from the back of the boat, because that's one of the best ways to learn, is to just get to go fishing with a bunch of different people. You may, even if it's learning what not to do, it's
Yeah.
still a great experience. So that was the one thing where yeah, I thought I was ready, and I really wasn't. But everything else has just kind of been slow. And basically what I do is once I start feeling like I'm having consistent success at that certain level, that's when I'll start thinking about going to the next level. So like I said, it's just been the stair step where we did the team tournaments. I basically learned how to tournament fish, started having some consistent success, did some co-angler stuff, had some success, did jump to the boat a little bit too quick, front of the boat a little bit too quick, but all that was is it takes an extra couple of years to really get that down. And then had some success from the front of the boat regionally in the western part of the United States. So I thought I was ready. I've always wanted to do the national thing, and having success regionally gave me that confidence to go to the national side of things. And then, now we're at the Elite Series, and I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm sure gonna try.
I mean, how would you say, how do you feel going into it this year? Like, or even based off of the Opens last year, did you feel like it was easier than you expected, or was it kind of more difficult than you expected? Or
Man, so I've done the Opens twice. I did them in 2020, and then I did them last year, 2022. And that field, that circuit, that Bassmaster Open I would put that tournament up against almost any field in bass fishing.
no, I totally agree.
Yeah, if you look at it, it's just you got all the best guys in their regions, right? You got all the best Florida guys, all the best Georgia guys, all the best South Carolina guys. They're all going to jump into that southern region. And then you got the home lake guys. And then you got the guys that are traveling that should be on the Elite Series, and they just haven't had their break yet. And then you have actual Elite Series guys. You got some MLF guys. You got man, you just have like it's truly one of the toughest fields. And on top of that, it's kind of the Wild West, where it's at least up until last year, there was no off limits. There was no information. There was just kind of no holds bar, and a lot of guys would spend a month at some of these lakes. So like, man, it's hard to compete against. So that was definitely one of the toughest fields I've ever fished against. It was not easy, but looking back on it, it was just kind of, when it's your time, and it really worked out well for me.
How would you say your mentality was going into last year trying to qualify for the elites? Like, would you say, because you said that you had fished the Opens the year before, right?
2 years before.
Do you have any like changes in your mentality from the first year to last year?
Not really in my mentality so much, but 2020 was the first time, that first attempt at the opens. That was the first time I really tried to fish, follow a national circuit, and I got my butt kicked. That was one of those instances where maybe I wasn't ready, or I wouldn't say I wasn't ready. It's just there was a much bigger learning curve going into that first year, following a circuit back east. Because I fished, you go back there and fish a championship, like uh, MLF championship back there, which is just one tournament. When you follow a circuit back there, you got to be consistent, and then you have to, kind of really know how to travel, especially coming from the West Coast. You got to know how to travel, know how things work out there. Um, so my mentality, so it wasn't really different going into this past year, but it was just I had much more experience, and I was much more comfortable with fishing on the East Coast.
See, were there any like big lessons or anything that you took away from last year that, let's say, if you can go back, like, and tell yourself, oh, do this, that you're gonna take with you this year into the elites?
I mean, it's just a lot of it's preparation. Being from the West Coast, living on the West Coast, I don't have that opportunity to bring my stuff back in the middle of the season or after every tournament and redo all my tackle and get a kind of fresh start every tournament. I have to bring everything with me because my boat and truck, once they leave California in January or February, they don't come back until the end of the season. So preparation is the biggest thing for that. Doing my homework. Uh, I spend a lot of time on the computer researching these lakes and Google Earth, stuff like that, because I don't have the opportunity a lot of times to go and spend a week there like some guys do in before off limits. So a lot of it is just preparation. That's the biggest thing, at least for me, that I think leads to a lot of success.
And like when you talk about your preparation, what are, like, I'm sure you look at some of the
Mhm.
topography maps and stuff as well. Is there any other things that kind of go into that prep as well? Like, what kind of research, or how do you go about the process? Let's say you're going to go to a lake. What's just a rough idea of the process that you go through to prepare for that event or that lake?
A lot of it's Google Earth. I do a lot of stuff when it's applicable. Google Earth Pro. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube on how to do all that stuff. I mean, I've been doing it for years, even before it got really popular, and it's been a huge tool for me, just to know what I'm in for before I get there. Having that idea, a rough idea of what I'm in for, and it's almost like you're practicing without being on the lake because you can see the entire lake. You see how it lays out. Okay, this side of the lake has a bunch of grass on it. This side has a bunch of timber on it. This creek arm is dirty. This creek arm is clear. Stuff like that. That's a huge part of my preparation. Um, like you said, topography maps. I'll bust out the Lowrance C map on their app on the phone. I'll do that. I'll look at that for a long time. The Navionics maps. I compare maps a lot of times, and if there's a paper map, I get a lot of times I'll get a paper map and just see if there's something different, something that's maybe not showing up on the digital maps. And then a lot of my research comes from past tournaments. I do a lot of I watch past tournament videos, past tournament TV shows. Um, I'll look at the results. I like to know what kind of weights it's going to take, what I can expect. What do I need to be looking for as far as fish size goes? What are the popular techniques? What kind of the areas that play at certain times a year? I do a lot of YouTube stuff. I mean, right before we jumped on here, I'm researching Okeechobee, and I just type in like Okeechobee bass fishing, and I just kind of scroll through the videos and see. Because sometimes I can get maybe a lake report from a lot of the guides have YouTube channels on all these big lakes, and I can get a recent lake report and see the conditions and stuff like that, and see where the fish are at. So it's a whole bunch of stuff, and it's not. I don't really have an order or a system. I just kind of do as much as I can to see to get as much information as I possibly can before I actually get to the lake.
So since it sounds like you've been doing a lot of prep for this season, are there any particular like events or places that you look forward to going to this year?
Yeah, there's actually, I'm excited for a lot of them. I think it's gonna be like, it's a pretty cool schedule. Um, the one that really sticks out is actually Lake Murray in South Carolina. Um, that's a blueback herring lake, and that one, I've been to Hartwell a few times, and the way those places fish, they really kind of suits my style of fishing. It's a lot of run and gun, a lot of picking the trolling motor up and hitting as many spots as you can throughout a day. That time of year is hopefully going to set up good for that. And then, man, that northern swing, I'm not the best smallmouth fisherman in the world. I know that. I just don't have a lot of experience doing it, especially on the northern lakes. I've done it a few times and I did okay at it, but it's just so much fun. Like it is such a blast to go up there and just, you're throwing 6, 8 pound tests for 3 to 6 pound smallmouth. It's pretty awesome to get to do that. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. St. Clair, Champlain, St. Lawrence River. Those are going to be fun.
Going off of that, you talk about how different styles of fishing in different places. I guess kind of go to something more general. Based on your experience, I mean, I got my own opinion because I haven't fished. I mean, nowhere near as much as you have back east, but I have been back there. And in your opinion, would you say a bass is simply a bass? A fish in California versus a fish in Florida, or a fish at a blueback herring lake, or even up north? What's your thoughts on that?
And man, that's what I always used to tell myself: is a bass is a bass. It really isn't. At least from what I've seen, man, it really, really isn't. Going from the West Coast to the East Coast, just in general, you're fishing, like, the West Coast fisheries don't get any pressure compared to an East Coast fishery. Just that alone, just the fishing pressure alone changes a bass so much from the West Coast to the East Coast. But then, like you said, you get into all those little kind of regional things where you got, Florida's different. South Carolina, the blueback lakes, those are different. Those fish act like no fish you've ever seen before in your life. They're totally pelagic. They just swim around chasing a herring that whole life. You go to the TVA, Tennessee Valley, and you fish like a Pickwick or a Kentucky Lake, and you're ledge fishing. Those fish are totally different. They got the river systems. We got a couple river systems on our schedule this year. Got Lay Lake, which is part of the Coosa River. Coosa River's it's different. I'm just gonna keep saying they're all different. Sabine River, that's different. And then you go up north, and we don't have anything like that. As far as on the West Coast. So yeah, a bass is a bass in a very, very general term, but once you start really breaking it down, they are really, really different from West Coast to East Coast, and even Southeast, Northeast, regional.
I totally agree. I went once to go fish a blueback herring for a tournament over there, and fish were acting like stripers. It's just
They're wild. Yeah,
yeah.
they're absolutely wild. It's crazy. Nothing like that. I've never seen anything like what they do there, as far as the blueback herring fish go. And then everything else is totally different too. But yeah, like generally a bass is a bass, but there's a lot of key instances where things are just different back there.
Would now that you've kind of gone through different parts of the U.S., what would you say are the difference in fishing styles that you've observed based on here in the West Coast versus East Coast or Florida or even Northeast, or just just generally speaking, the differences in fishing styles that you've noticed?
Yeah, people, I guess the biggest thing and it's not so much with the tournament fishermen, but more like with the general population of fishermen on the East Coast. They're almost kind of stuck in their ways, where you'll be going down the bank and, like you'll go past 7 guys and they're all throwing a spinner bait at a laydown. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I might be going down, I might be boat number 8 doing that, but they're very kind of meat and potatoes with their fishing, spinner bait, jig, big worm, very simplistic. Whereas, and I like keeping my fishing simplistic. I really do. I try to do that as much as I can. But when you kind of come to the West Coast, it's really technique rich. And what I mean by that is just like you could go if you live like I live in Sacramento now or Sacramento area now, and I can go in 3 hours and I can be fishing 40 different techniques with confidence and catching fish on all of them. Whereas, if you've been to a lake in Oklahoma, you're going to be flipping a jig into a bush and then throwing a spinnerbait next to it. Or you go to Florida and you're going to be fishing a stick bait and then a chatterbait. We have so many more differences in our fishing in our lakes than they do. Everything's very, very regional back there. You go to the Ozarks and you're going to have guys throwing a wiggle wart and throwing a football jig. That's what they're going to do. You go to, like I said, go to Oklahoma, you're going to have a guy throwing a spinnerbait and a jig. But you come to California, and if we go to the Delta, we're going to be flipping with 65-pound braid and throwing a frog. And then 2 hours east of that, you could go to one of the motherlode lakes and be drop shotting in 60 feet of water with 6-pound test. So that's where we get that technique rich kind of environment. And they just don't, they're just, the regions are just so vast on the East Coast that I don't think they don't really have to have a lot of techniques in their back pocket.
So would you say that versatility that you had to develop fishing out here definitely helped you out going back east?
Oh, it's everything. It's everything, man. I say it a lot whenever I'm doing a seminar or talking to anybody. That's my biggest strength is I feel as comfortable with 6-pound test as I do with 65-pound test. I feel as confident with a frog that I do with a drop shot. I feel as confident with a deep crank as I do with a buzzbait. I feel like the West Coast in as a whole, if you really break it, if you really take the whole from like Washington down to Arizona, everything in between, you got to know how to do everything if you want to compete, especially in a traveling circuit. That's and kind of going back to where I cut my teeth on the West Coast. I would fish everything I could. West Coast, every big tournament I could. So I would be on like Lake Havasu one day, and then maybe 2 weeks later I'm on the Delta, and a couple of weeks later I'm on Shasta. A month later I'm on the Columbia River, and you either adapt or die pretty much. It forces you to become very, very versatile growing up and fishing West Coast circuits.
Since you've been fishing back east now for a few years, would you say your fishing style has like evolved, or would you say you've mostly just transferred those things that you learned out here in the West Coast and have just been applying it back east?
Honestly, I've actually learned a lot of the techniques back there. I kind of got my baseline of, I feel confident with everything, but there are those special like little niche things that you just kind of pick up while you're fishing back there. A great example of that would be we fished a tournament 2 years ago at Harris Chain in Florida, and it was kind of a little bit of the West Coast stuff that I've done, and then kind of a new technique or kind of a spin on an old technique for me that I haven't done before. So I would start out every morning throwing a square bill up against a seawall, which is something I do a lot at Clear Lake. Little 1.5 striking up against the seawall. Like it felt like I was literally fishing Clear Lake. And then once the sun came up, they stopped biting that. It was like a shad spawn deal. Once that kind of died off, I would go flip a stick bait into Kissimmee grass, which I've flipped a ton in my life, and I love flipping, but I've never flipped Kissimmee grass. I've never flipped a half-ounce weight with a stick bait, 5-inch stick bait. It was different. So I had to, kind of gain confidence in that. So it's kind of, I get to draw sometimes on the techniques that I've learned from the West Coast, and then sometimes I have to learn something totally new. Um, the ledge fishing thing on those TVA lakes, like that's totally new to me. I've never done anything like that. I mean, I've fished deep before. Fished deep for largemouth, like at Clear Lake. Same techniques, a big swim bait, big crankbait, big worm, stuff like that. But doing the ledge fishing thing is totally different. Where they set up, how they set up. So it's kind of, I get to draw from the techniques, but it's a whole new way of fishing. And just that combination is really kind of, it's worked out really well for me.
So the next question I have is kind of based, I mean, it's kind of a personal question I'm asking, but I'm really curious from your perspective, having had the success that you've had, as far as fishing off of intuition or like, and then fishing more kind of, I guess, by the textbook or that method, which group do you think you tend to fall into more? And if you had instances where, where fishing off intuition has worked really good for you, or you get like a hunch or a feeling to go do something, or do you kind of just fish more based on, oh, fish should be doing this time of the year, I'm just going to do that?
It's a bit of both. So I guess we'll start out with the fish should be doing this time of year. I always draw on seasonal patterns. Everything I do is based off of seasonal patterns. If it's springtime, early springtime, I'm going to be looking for fish, staging next to spawning flats, just as an example. That's kind of where I get my starting point for finding them. And then once we found them, then we can kind of adjust from there and kind of hopefully follow those fish. Intuition is really, it's more of it plays a bigger role in a tournament, just as far as decision making goes. And it's something that I think every bass angler has. They just don't. I mean, if you've been bass fishing for 5 years, you have intuition. You've seen enough bass get caught to where you should be able to recognize something as you're driving down the lake in your boat and you see a lay down along the bank, and you just kind of look at it and you're like, man, I've caught fish out of that before, and you just keep going. Well, that's you not paying attention to your intuition. And it was a huge step up in my fishing game when I really started paying attention to that, because I would, in my younger years, I'd always have a plan. I would always have that plan of, I need to be here at 9 o'clock, here at 10 o'clock. Okay, I'm gonna have a limit by 11, and then I could go do this from 11 to 1. And, I'd have everything kind of planned out. And the second that doesn't work, well, your day is like, it feels like it's falling apart. So I always have an idea of what I want to do now, but I really pay attention to my intuition more. And that really helps, especially in multi-day tournaments. It's huge, because if I know what I'm looking for and I see it, I have the confidence to stop, even if I'm going to another spot, even if I'm like, I know I'm going to go catch a bass here, but I'm driving down the lake and I see that lay down that matches the pattern that I'm using, I'm going to go pull over and do it. Whereas, 5-10 years ago, I might have not have stopped. I would have just gone, stuck with my plan, and maybe I catch a fish there, or maybe I don't. But, I never catch a fish on a spot that I never fish. So, intuition is absolutely, it's everything in my fishing, for sure.
Hey, have you had any specific instances where maybe you got burned by not doing something that you found out later on was working, or instances where you do something off a whim and then you go and it, completely transforms your event or tournament?
Yeah, I mean, it happened in the last tournament I fished in Toho in Florida. Um, I saw a tree. I'm fishing a Kissimmee grass line, and I see this bush, and I haven't been bit on a. I had a striking sexy dog on the front deck. I kind of always have that on the front deck when the water's warm, and I haven't been bit on it all practice. Well, no, that's a lie. I had a couple blowups in practice, so it's there just in case. But it's really situational. And I'm driving down this bank, and I see this tree, and it's like the only tree on that whole bank. I'm like, huh, there's probably a fish there. And I go and I fish it, and I actually don't get bit. So kind of disappointing, but it made sense at the time. Anyway, long story short, that was the first day. 2 days later, I'm coming up to the same tree, and I catch my biggest fish of the day out of that tree on that striking sexy dog. So my intuition was there. Timing was just a little bit off, but that kind of thing happens a lot. You just have to you have to let the fish talk to you, and then you have to pay attention uh, to what they're saying, and then you have to pay attention to what your gut feeling is telling you. That's very very seldom does your gut feeling actually steer you in the wrong direction. So yeah, that's those are always cool little things that I love sharing, and I think it really helps maybe an angler who doesn't trust his intuition to just it's not, I'm not going to say it's going to work every time, but when it does work, it's really really cool, and you gain a lot of confidence that way.
No, I totally agree. I've had too many instances where, like, I mean, last year, I guess I had one where I was fishing at this lake, kind of close to the Bay Area that I go to a lot, and I was catching them. I was going to this lake every single day, and I was in this area, and I was catching them on different baits every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Then I got to one day where I tried all the stuff I'd been working the previous days, the textbook stuff, and it wasn't working. And then I had this crankbait that I made when I was in high school, and I busted out. And for some reason, I just kind of had this feeling. I'm like, oh, maybe I should use this. So I started using it, and I ended up catching two 9-pounders, not on the same day, but on back-to-back days, off a little tiny area. So
Awesome.
definitely, that's why I always like asking that question, because I have my opinion on it, but someone as successful as you, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on it. So
Absolutely, intuition is everything.
um, as far as your fishing style goes, you kind of mentioned that you like to run and gun a lot. What would you say are like your favorite baits you like to use, techniques you like to use? Like how would you describe your fishing style?
My fishing style is actually kind of different than my favorite bait. Um, my fishing style is as fast as I can possibly go, while I still feel like I'm being efficient. My whole, uh, I guess, it's kind of like a thesis, I guess would be a word for it. My whole idea behind finding fish is covering as much water as I possibly can. The more water I cover, the more information I'm going to get, as far as areas and what the fish are doing and how they're reacting, um, and just seeing as much of the lake as possible. It's always been the way I like to do it. Now I adjust my technique obviously for different lakes, but covering water and fishing fast has always been my fishing style. If I'm at Florida, then I'm going to be throwing a chatterbait or swimming a worm, throwing a topwater, fishing quick. And if I'm in, the Midwest, then I'll be throwing like a striking series 3, that little crankbait, kind of wigglewort style crankbait, something I could go pretty quick with. And then, if we're up north chasing smallmouth, if I can get away with it, a spinner bait or a crankbait, something that I can move. But that's always been the way I like to do it. I always like to be as efficient as possible. That's my whole thing. So, and then my favorite technique is kind of totally opposite of that. I love punching. Flipping heavy cover I am so happy when I get to do that. And it's not the quickest technique in the world. It's not a technique that you're going to be covering a ton of water throughout the day. So that's where it is kind of the opposite, but it is sort of still power fishing because I still feel like it's a reaction bite. most of the time, similar to a lot of the other, similar to a crankbait. That fish sees that crankbait go by, he just reacts to it going by. Whereas it's the same deal with flipping setup, where if I'm punching, I'm using heavy weight. That weight falls super quick. That fish has to react to it. Am I going to eat it? Am I going to let it go? So, it's a reaction bait. It's just kind of slower and more methodical. But there's nothing else in the world I'd rather do than grab a big flipping stick and go punch the nastiest grass clump on the lake and try to pull the fish out of it.
When a spot or a place has like a ton of pressure, how do you go about like fishing bluffs or rock walls?
It's I backlash a lot, but I also cast further than a lot of people.
What's kind of your overall thoughts on swim baits?
I am not a fan. I don't. I won't say I hate them, but they're way up there.
When you're in a slump or you're not fishing as good, what are some things that you tend to do? What's your go-to rig when the conditions are tough? What's it like being a pro? Do you make a decent living?